What if the homeless beggar you just kicked was actually the billionaire owner of the building? In a world obsessed with status, one CEO decided to risk it all. He traded his Armani suit for rags, disguised himself as a homeless man, and sat outside his own luxury hotel. His goal? To see who would spit on him, and who would save him. We all wonder, is there any humanity left in the corporate world? Or have we become so blinded by money that we've forgotten how to be human? It's painful to think that your worth is measured only by your wallet. But today, Judgment Day has arrived. Meet Daniel Morgan, a tycoon tired of the fake smiles. And meet Sophia, a struggling maid terrified of losing her job to a cruel manager who treats the poor like trash. What happens when these two worlds collide on a cold sidewalk is not just a social experiment, it's a shocking revelation that exposes the dark heart of power and the blinding light of kindness. Prepare yourself. You're about to witness a brutal firing, a heartbreaking sacrifice, and a reveal so satisfying it will leave you cheering. The manager thinks he's cleaning up trash, but he's about to throw away his entire career. This story will restore your faith in justice. If you believe kindness always wins, like this video right now. Subscribe to join our community of truth seekers, and let's find out what happens when the boss becomes the beggar. Daniel Morgan stood paralyzed before the floor-to-ceiling mirror of his penthouse, the reflection staring back at him feeling like a stranger wrapped in Italian silk. He was preparing to dismantle his own identity, orchestrating a stunt far more perilous than any episode of Undercover Billionaire, for this was no televised drama, it was a desperate quest for truth. As the hotel owner, he felt a gnawing suspicion that the marble-clad empire he had built was rotting from the core, infected by a culture of apathy that he had negligently ignored. He wasn't just looking for operational flaws, he was hunting for the soul of his company, terrified that empathy had been evicted from the premises long ago. With trembling hands, he began the shocking ritual of shedding his privilege, trading his tailored suit for layers of grime-stained, mismatched rags that smelled of stale rain and urban decay. He smeared a mixture of grease and dirt onto his face, masking the sharp, well-fed features of a tycoon until he effectively vanished, replaced by the hollow shell of a homeless man. This metamorphosis was not merely physical, it was a psychological descent into the abyss of being unwanted, an unpretentious surrender to the lowest rung of the social ladder. He felt a strange, suffocating weight settle in his chest, the heavy burden of invisibility that thousands carried daily, now resting squarely on his shoulders. The plan was deceptively simple but fraught with emotional landmines. He would position himself on the cold pavement outside his own lobby and beg for a cup of water. It was to be the ultimate kindness test, a trap laid not for the wicked, but for the indifferent, a stage set to reveal the true character of those he employed. He knew judgment would rain down upon him, swift and merciless, but he needed to feel its sting to understand the reality of the streets. This social experiment was his only way to pierce the bubble of sycophancy that surrounded him and see if a miracle of compassion could still bloom in the concrete wasteland he owned. Stepping out of the service elevator and into the alley, Daniel was immediately assaulted by the biting wind, a stark contrast to the climate-controlled sterile perfection of his penthouse. The city noise, usually a distant hum from his office, now roared in his ears, a chaotic symphony of indifference that made him feel small and insignificant. It was a heartbreaking transition. Within minutes, the eyes of passers-by began to slide off him as if he were made of glass, a ghostly figure haunting the edges of their vision. He whispered to himself, "I am no one," a mantra to kill his ego, clutching a cardboard sign that would soon become his only voice. He shuffled toward the designated spot near the grand entrance, his heart pounding a rhythm of dread and anticipation, fully aware that destiny was about to deal its cards. From the shadows, he spotted the bad manager pacing near the valet stand, a man whose pristine resume masked a tyrant's heart, barking orders with a sneer that curdled the blood. Daniel shrank back, pulling his tattered collar up to hide the humiliated expression that threatened to break his cover, realizing that the monster he sought to expose was already prowling his domain. He was no longer the apex predator, he was prey in a jungle of concrete and steel. The evening shift was just beginning, and the air grew heavy with the exhaust of luxury cars and the scent of expensive perfume, mocking his simulated poverty. He waited, shivering not just from the cold but from the profound loneliness of his position, wondering if the reveal would bring redemption or utter despair. He needed a catalyst, a human connection to prove that his life's work wasn't entirely devoid of heart. Unbeknownst to him, a poor maid named Sophia Davis was clocking in, carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders, completely unaware that she was about to become the fulcrum of a life lesson that would shatter their realities. As he settled onto the unforgiving concrete, Daniel felt the gravel dig into his skin, a visceral reminder that this was no game, but a crucible of human values. He watched the revolving doors spin, swallowing guests and spitting out staff, a mechanical mouth that seemed indifferent to the suffering outside. He took a deep breath, inhaling the grit of the street, and prepared himself for the inevitable collision of worlds. The stage was set, the players were moving into position, and the silence before the storm was deafening. Sophia Davis hurried down the damp, gray pavement, her worn-out sneakers splashing through puddles that mirrored the gloom of the overcast sky. She clutched her handbag to her chest as if it contained the crown jewels, though it held nothing more than a meager lunch and an overdue electric bill. Every step she took was heavy with the terrifying possibility of being evicted, a specter that haunted her waking hours and turned her dreams into nightmares. As a poor maid in a city that worshipped excess, she felt like an intruder in her own life, constantly on the verge of being erased by the crushing machinery of poverty. Her heart hammered a frantic rhythm against her ribs, a physical manifestation of the anxiety that had become her constant companion. The looming silhouette of the hotel rose before her like a fortress, a place of immense beauty that served as her daily dungeon. She paused for a fleeting second at the staff entrance, gathering the fragments of her composure before facing the bad manager, a man whose cruelty was as legendary as the hotel's 5-star rating. He was a predator who thrived on the fear of his subordinates, using the threat of unemployment as a whip to enforce his tyrannical will. Sophia knew that one wrong move, one unpolished surface, or 1 minute of lateness could shatter her fragile existence. She took a deep, shaky breath, trying to armor herself against the inevitable verbal assault that awaited her inside those gilded walls.
Stepping into the service corridor, the air shifted instantly from a humid street smell to the sterile, chemical scent of industrial cleaner the smell of her servitude. She moved with the practiced invisibility of someone trying to avoid judgment, keeping her head down and her eyes fixed on the scuffed linoleum floor. The contrast between the opulent lobby she cleaned and the dingy back hallways she traversed was a heartbreaking reminder of the stark divide between the haves and the have-nots. She was an unpretentious cog in a billion-dollar engine, necessary for its function, but completely disposable in the eyes of those who held the keys. Inside the locker room, the atmosphere was thick with a palpable tension, a silent language of fear shared among the housekeeping staff. Her colleagues exchanged nervous glances, whispering rumors about the manager's explosive temper that day, their faces drawn and pale under the harsh fluorescent lights. "He's looking for a scapegoat," one of the older maids murmured, her hands trembling as she tied her apron strings. Sophia swallowed the lump in her throat, feeling the collective anxiety of the room seeping into her pores. She quickly changed into her uniform, the stiff black fabric feeling less like clothing and more like a straitjacket binding her to this destiny. She checked her reflection in the cracked mirror, not out of vanity, but out of a desperate need for perfection to ensure survival. A single stray hair or a wrinkled collar could be the catalyst for a disaster she couldn't afford, especially with her mother's medical bills piling up like snowdrifts. The thought of her sick mother waiting at home, depending entirely on her meager income, sent a sharp pang of regret through her regret that she couldn't do more, earn more, be more. But she pushed the emotion down, locking away in a box deep within her mind. There was no room for weakness here. As she walked toward the briefing room, she couldn't shake the feeling that something shocking was about to happen, a disturbance in the delicate balance of her world. The hotel felt different tonight, charged with a static electricity that made the hairs on her arms stand up. She prayed for a quiet shift, for the ability to remain unseen. But deep down, she knew that the universe had other plans. Karma was a concept she clung to desperately, hoping that eventually the scales would tip in favor of the righteous, but lately it felt like a fairy tale for fools. Sophia slipped into the back of the briefing room. Making herself as small as possible, her eyes darting toward the front where the manager stood like a general reviewing his troops. She didn't know it yet, but outside on the cold concrete, a homeless man hotel owner in disguise was waiting, and their paths were on a collision course. Her life was dangling by a thread, and tonight, that thread would be pulled to its breaking point. She braced herself for the storm, unaware that the miracle she needed was disguised as the very thing she was told to despise. The briefing room was suffocatingly silent, the air sucked out by the imposing presence of the manager, who paced the front of the room like a caged tiger. He was a man who wore his authority like a weapon, using it to bludgeon the spirit of anyone unfortunate enough to report to him. "Listen closely," he barked, his voice dripping with a disdain that made Sophia's skin crawl. "I have noticed a disturbing drop in standards." He was the epitome of a bad manager, a petty tyrant who believed that fear was the only effective management tool, completely blind to the toxicity he injected into the workplace. He stopped pacing and turned to face them, his eyes scanning the row of terrified staff with a look of pure disgust, as if he were looking at insects rather than people. "There is trash accumulating near the entrance," he sneered, curling his lip as he spat out the word. "We are a luxury establishment, a sanctuary for the elite, not a soup kitchen for the dregs of society." His dehumanizing language was a shocking display of arrogance, reducing human beings to mere refuse to be swept away. Sophia felt a wave of nausea roll through her stomach. His words struck a nerve, reminding her of how easily she could become that trash if her paycheck stopped coming. "If you see any homeless man or beggar within 50 feet of our doors, you are to remove them," he commanded, his voice dropping to a sinister, conspiratorial whisper. "I don't care how you do it. Call security, threaten them, physically block them, just get rid of the eyesore." This illegal and immoral order hung in the air like a poisonous cloud, challenging the conscience of every person in the room. It was a clear kindness test, but in reverse passing it meant failing as a human being. The manager was demanding they trade their empathy for their employment. "I don't want our guests to be subjected to the sight of poverty," he continued, adjusting his silk tie with a manicured hand, oblivious of the karma he was inviting upon himself. "We sell fantasy here, and the reality of the street ruins that fantasy." To him, the suffering of others was merely an aesthetic inconvenience, a smudge on the glass of his perfect world. It was a heartbreaking revelation of his character, a man so hollowed out by ambition that he had lost the ability to feel anything but contempt for the vulnerable. Anyone caught showing pity, giving food, or even talking to these parasites would be fired on the spot. He threatened, locking eyes with Sophia for a terrifying second. "Do I make myself clear?" A chorus of weak, trembling yes. Sir responses murmured through the room, fueled by the collective terror of being evicted from their jobs and lives. This wasn't leadership. It was a hostage situation. He was unknowingly setting the stage for his own downfall, provoking a social experiment that would expose his rot to the very hotel owner he sought to impress. He dismissed them with a sharp wave of his hand, as if shooing away flies, muttering about incompetence under his breath. "Get to work. And remember, I am watching every move you make." The threat lingered in the hallway long after he left, a heavy shadow that followed Sophia as she pushed her cleaning cart toward the elevators. She felt a deep, burning sense of regret for being part of a machine that ground people into dust, but her survival instinct kept her feet moving. Sophia pressed the elevator button, her mind racing with the cruelty of the order she had just received. She was trapped between her morals and her needs, a dilemma that tore at her soul. She didn't know that the trash the manager wanted removed was actually an undercover billionaire poised to deliver a life lesson of epic proportions. As the doors closed, sealing her in, she felt a profound sense of foreboding. Destiny was winding up for a strike, and the target was painted on the back of the man who had just ordered them to be cruel. Daniel Morgan shifted uncomfortably on the freezing pavement, the cold seeping to the thin cardboard that separated him from the earth, settling deep into his bones like a physical weight. The wind had picked up, cutting through the holes in his ragged coat, serving as a constant, biting reminder of the vulnerability he had voluntarily embraced. He held out a trembling paper cup, his voice raspy and weak as he implored the rushing crowd. "Spare some change? Just a little water?" But his words dissolved into the cacophony of the city, unheard and unheeded. He was experiencing the brutal reality of his social experiment firsthand, And the data was grim. To be poor was to be invisible. Wealthy guests, some wearing brands he owned shares in, walked past him with a deliberate blindness, their laughter and chatter creating a barrier he couldn't penetrate. They stepped around him with a wide, careful berth, as if his poverty were a contagious disease that could infect them through proximity. It was a deeply humiliated state of being, one that stripped away his dignity layer by layer until he felt less like a man and more like an obstacle. He watched Italian leather shoes worth more than a monthly minimum wage step over his outstretched legs, the irony not lost on the undercover billionaire owned the very ground they walked on, yet he wasn't allowed to exist upon it. He caught the eye of a young, well-dressed couple, hoping for a flicker of recognition, a spark of sympathy, or even basic acknowledgement. Instead, they quickly averted their gaze, engaging in an invisible stare, a practiced societal reflex used to unsee the suffering right in front of them. Daniel felt a surge of profound regret, not for his disguise, but for the culture he had helped perpetuate. Had his own pursuit of profit contributed to this icy indifference? The kindness test was failing miserably, and his heart grew heavier with every rejection, every averted eye, every accelerated step away from him. Please, just a cup of water. I'm so thirsty. He tried again, his throat parched and dry, desperation creeping into his tone. A man in a sharp business suit paused, looked down at him with a sneer of judgment, and scoffed. Get a job, you bum, the man muttered, tossing the cruel cliche like a stone before walking away. Daniel wanted to scream that he created thousands of jobs, that he built skylines, but he remained silent, swallowing the insult. He had to endure this heartbreaking abuse to understand the true depth of the problem. He had to drink the bitter cup to the dregs. From inside the hotel lobby, the warm, golden light spilled out onto the street, casting long, mocking shadows that danced around his shivering form. He could see the concierge desk, the plush velvet chairs, the world of comfort and safety he had abandoned for the night. It felt light years away, a different universe entirely, separated by a pane of glass that might as well have been a fortress wall. He was beginning to truly understand the despair of the homeless man, the crushing feeling that the world has moved on without you, leaving you to fade into the gray of the sidewalk. He pulled his knees to his chest, trying to conserve whatever body heat he had left, wondering if anyone at all would break the pattern of apathy. He needed a miracle, a sign that humanity wasn't completely lost to selfishness and greed. He watched the revolving doors spin, spitting out guests and staff, waiting for the inevitable confrontation he knew was coming. The bad manager was prowling, and Daniel was sitting directly in his crosshairs. The tension was building, a silent countdown to a clash of classes. Suddenly, the side service door opened, and Daniel saw the manager step out, scanning the perimeter with the eyes of a predator seeking prey. Daniel braced himself, gripping his sign tighter as an unpretentious shield against the coming storm. The reveal was still far off first. He had to survive the indignity. He lowered his head, making himself small, but his spirit was alert. The real test was about to start, and he was the target. Destiny was about to bring the hammer down. The manager spotted Daniel instantly, his eyes narrowing with a predatory delight as he marched across the pavement, closing the distance with aggressive strides. He didn't see a human being in need. He saw a blemish on his pristine driveway, a problem to be eradicated before it offended the sensibilities of his high-paying clientele. I told you people to clear off, he shouted, his voice laced with venom, causing several guests to turn and watch the spectacle. Without a shred of hesitation, he wound up his leg and violently kicked the cardboard sign from Daniel's hands, sending it fluttering away in the wind, a shocking act of unprovoked aggression. Daniel flinched not from fear, but from the sheer audacity of the physical assault. The manager stood over him, blocking out the streetlights, casting a menacing, elongated shadow that seemed to swallow Daniel whole. "Look at you," the manager mocked, gesturing theatrically to the guests who had paused to watch. "You're disgusting. Get up and get out before I call the police to drag you away like the trash you are." It was a public, humiliated display, a performance designed to crush Daniel's spirit and assert dominance. The bad manager was preening for an audience, showing off his power over the weak. "I just need some water, sir," Daniel croaked, staying perfectly in character despite the rage boiling in his gut like molten lava. He looked up, memorizing every line of the manager's face, a face he would soon see in a very different context. Water costs money, the manager sneered, kicking Daniel's meager paper cup into the dirty gutter water. And you don't look like you have 2 nickels to rub together. The cruelty was gratuitous, a clear sign of a man who enjoyed inflicting pain on the helpless. Karma was taking detailed notes of every insult. The guests whispered among themselves, some looking uncomfortable, others smirking in agreement. But Crucialino one intervened. It was a life lesson in the bystander effect and herd mentality. They let the manager bully a homeless man because his uniform and authority gave him a societal pass. Daniel felt the cold wetness of the ground seeping through his pants, but his internal resolve hardened like steel. This man had signed his own professional death warrant, though he was too arrogant to read the fine print. "You are trash," the manager spat, leaning down uncomfortably close to Daniel's face, his breath smelling of coffee and malice. "And I don't want trash in front of my hotel." The word might echoed in Daniel's mind the supreme arrogance of claiming ownership over an empire he merely serviced. The hotel owner stayed silent, absorbing the insults, letting the manager dig his grave deeper with every syllable. Every word was a nail in his coffin, and the judgment was becoming absolute. "If I see you here in 10 minutes, he'll have you thrown in the dumpster where you belong," the manager threatened, straightening his suit jacket and checking his cuffs as if he had just performed a public service. He turned back to the guests with a fake, oily smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Apologies for the disturbance, ladies and gentlemen. We aim to keep the environment pristine." He walked back inside, leaving Daniel shivering, exposed, and boiling with a cold fury. It was a heartbreaking scene of unchecked power and moral bankruptcy. Daniel retrieved his battered sign, his hand shaking slightly with suppressed adrenaline. He wasn't broken, but he was furious. He had seen the darkness in his company's heart, the rot he had suspected. Now he waited to see if there was any light left to save. He needed a miracle to restore his faith in his own creation. The revenge would be sweet and total, but first, he needed to witness true kindness to balance the scales. High above the street, on the 2nd floor, Sophia Davis was dusting a windowsill when the commotion below caught her eye. She looked down through the glass and gasped, her hand flying to her mouth to stifle a cry as she witnessed a shocking scene unfolding on the pavement. She saw the manager kick the poor man's sign, saw the aggressive posture, the flying cup, and felt a sick, twisting knot form in her stomach. It was a display of cruelty that made her tremble with regret for being part of an organization that sanctioned such abuse. She felt a deep, vibrating connection to the stranger's helplessness. She watched the man who she didn't know was the undercover billionaire curl into himself, humiliated and alone in the aftermath of the assault. Unlike the manager, she didn't see trash or a nuisance. She saw a father, a brother, a son who had fallen on hard times and was being kicked while he was down. Tears pricked her eyes as she felt a profound pang of sympathy that transcended the glass barrier. She knew intimately what it was like to be hungry, to be looked down upon, to be one paycheck away from that very sidewalk. It was a heartbreaking mirror of her own deepest fears, of her own potential destiny. "That monster," she whispered to herself, gripping the duster until her knuckles turned white, her anger flaring hot and bright. The manager's briefing earlier echoed in her mind, removed the trash, but her heart rebelled violently against the order. This wasn't trash, this was a human being in pain. The kindness test was happening right now, not on the street, but inside her soul. She looked around the empty hallway. No one else seemed to care. The world moving on with its callous indifference. The weight of the silence was heavy, but she knew she couldn't just stand there and watch. She saw the man shivering, the wind whipping his thin coat, trying to salvage his dignity from the gutter. A fierce protective instinct surged within her, overriding her training and her fear. She was just a poor maid, terrified for her job, but her humanity was stronger than her survival instinct in that moment. She thought of her own lunch sitting in her bogus sandwich she had saved for a break, the only meal she would have that day. It wasn't much, but it was something real. The social experiment of life was asking her a question: what are you going to do when no one is watching? She weighed the risks in a split second. If she was caught helping him, she would be fired instantly for the manager's explicit threat. The terror of being evicted loomed large, a monster ready to devour her if she lost her income. But looking at that lonely figure, she knew she couldn't live with herself if she did nothing. It was a moment of judgment not for him, but for her own conscience. She had to act. Karma wasn't just about punishment, it was about balance, and she had to be the one to tip the scales back toward humanity. Sophia made a decision that defied logic, but embraced grace. She quickly finished the window, checking the corridor with the paranoia of a fugitive. Her heart pounded against her ribs like a trapped bird, threatening to burst from her chest. She was going to break the rules. She was going to sneak out. It was a reckless, unpretentious act of rebellion born from pure compassion and a refusal to let cruelty win. She hurried to the staff room. Grabbing her bag and a spare wool blanket she kept in her locker for the night, she slept at the hotel between double shifts. Her hands were shaking uncontrollably, but her resolve was firm. She was about to step into the line of fire for a stranger. She didn't know it, but this act was about to unlock a miracle she could never have imagined, setting in motion a chain of events that would change everything. Sophia moved through the back corridors like a shadow, her senses heightened to a painful degree as she avoided the security cameras she knew by heart. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like a gunshot in the quiet hallway, amplifying her terror. She was risking her livelihood, her safety, and her future for a homeless man she had never met. The fear of the bad manager catching her was palpable, a cold sweat breaking out on her forehead and trickling down her back. But the image of the man shivering outside pushed her forward, a magnetic pull she couldn't resist. It was a life lesson in courage acting in spite of fear. She reached the heavy metal service door, pausing to listen for footsteps. Her breath held tight in her lungs. Silence. She pushed the heavy bar, slipping out into the cold night air. The transition instant and shocking. The wind bit at her exposed skin, reminding her immediately of the man suffering. She scanned the area and saw him huddled against the wall, a lonely, darker shape against the darkness. She clutched the blanket in her sandwich tight, approaching him with soft, unpretentious steps, trying not to startle a man who had already been assaulted. "Excuse me?" she whispered, her voice trembling slightly in the wind. Daniel looked up, startled, his muscles tensing for another attack. He expected another kick or an insult, but instead, he saw a young woman in a maid's uniform, her eyes filled with a liquid concern that melted his defenses. This was the reveal he had been waiting for, not of his identity, but of hers. She knelt down on the dirty concrete, disregarding the grime that would stain her uniform, placing herself on his level. It was a simple gesture that screamed dignity and equality. "I saw what happened," she said softly, unfolding the warm wool blanket with gentle hands. "I'm so sorry. He's a cruel man." She draped the blanket over his shoulders, tucking it in with a tenderness that nearly broke Daniel's composure. The warmth was immediate, encompassing him physically, but the warmth of her spirit was what truly thawed the ice in his heart. This poor maid was risking everything, her job, her homito, comfort him. It was a shocking act of defiance against the hotel's cold culture, a rebellion of kindness. "Here," she said, pulling a wrapped sandwich from her pocket. "It's not much, just a turkey sandwich, but it's fresh. I made it this morning." She offered it with two hands, a sign of deep respect. Daniel stared at the food, then at her face. He saw the fatigue in her eyes, the worry lines etched around her mouth, yet she was giving away her own sustenance. This was a kindness test, and she was passing with a brilliance that blinded him. "Thank you," he managed to say, his voice thick with emotion, struggling to maintain the persona of the beggar. "You shouldn't be out here," Daniel warned, genuinely concerned for her safety now. "If he sees you." Sophia offered a sad, brave smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I know, but I couldn't leave you like this. No one deserves that." Her words were a balm to his soul, proving that humanity still flickered in the dark. She was placing empathy above her own security. It was a heartbreaking sacrifice that spoke volumes about her character. She checked the door nervously, her eyes darting back to the hotel. "Eat quickly," she urged gently. "I have to get back before they notice I'm gone." She stayed crouched beside him, offering a momentary shield against the world, a companion in the cold. In that quiet, dirty alley, a bond was formed between the hotel owner and his lowest-paid employee, a bond forged in the fires of empathy. Destiny had brought them together, and the wheels of justice were beginning to turn, powered by a simple sandwich. Daniel took the sandwich, his hands shaking partly from the lingering cold, but mostly from the sheer impact of the moment. He was stunned by Sophia's grace, a quality so rare in his world of sharks and boardrooms that it felt like a miracle. He looked at her, really looked at her, studying the name tag that read Sophia, as if it were a medal of honor. He memorized it instantly. She treated him with a dignity that most people reserve for royalty or celebrities. Completely unaware she was feeding the undercover billionaire who owned the very bricks behind her. "You're very kind," Daniel said, taking a bite. It was the best sandwich he had ever tasted, seasoned with a flavor of genuine compassion and sacrifice. "Why help me? You saw him kick me. You could get in trouble." He wanted to understand the source of her light, to probe the depths of her motivation. Sophia shrugged, pulling her thin cardigan tighter against the wind. "Trouble is temporary," she said simply, her voice carrying a wisdom beyond her years. "Being a human being, that's forever. My mom always says, be the light you want to see." Her words struck him like a physical blow, resonating deep within his conscience. This poor maid had more wisdom in her little finger than his entire executive board combined. It was a life lesson he needed to relearn, a fundamental truth he had let slip away in the pursuit of profit. He chewed slowly, savoring the moment and the company. "You have a good mother," he commented softly. Sophia's smile faltered slightly, a shadow passing over her face like a cloud blocking the sun. "She's the best," she whispered, her voice catching on the words. Daniel noticed the crack in her armor, the subtle tremor in her voice. He sensed a story there, a struggle she was hiding behind her brave face. "Is she okay?" he asked gently, probing not as a boss, but as a confidant in the dark. The unpretentious setting of the alleyway made barriers fall away. Social hierarchy didn't exist here. Here, they were just two souls talking in the night. Sophia hesitated, looking at the stranger who seemed to listen with an intensity she wasn't used to. She's sick," Sophia admitted, looking down at her worn shoes as if ashamed of her vulnerability. "And the bills, they don't stop coming." She didn't know why she was telling him this. Maybe because he was a homeless man, someone outside the system, someone who wouldn't judge her for being poor, because he was in the same boat. It was a safe space to vent her fears. Daniel listened, his heart aching with a new kind of pain. This woman was drowning, yet she stopped swimming to save him. The judgment he had feared earlier from the public was replaced by a profound respect for her. He realized that the people keeping his empire running were fighting battles he knew nothing about. This social experiment was no longer just about testing staff. It was about discovering the hidden heroes and the failures of his own leadership. Sophia was a diamond in the rough, shining bright in the dirty alley. "You're a good person, Sophia," Daniel said, using her name with a gravity that surprised her. "Good things come to those who wait." It sounded like a platitude, but from him, it was a promise, a destiny-altering promise. She smiled sadly, a look of weary resignation. "I hope so. Right now, I just hope I don't get fired." The irony was bitter. She was worried about losing her job, unaware she was currently securing her future and perhaps saving the soul of the company. Emboldened by his kindness and the safety of the shadows, Sophia sat on a discarded crate next to him, stealing a few more minutes from her shift to connect with another human being. The air between them felt charged with a raw honesty that was impossible inside the hotel's artificial environment. "It's hard, you know," she confided, her guard completely down. "I work double shifts, sometimes 7 days a week. The bad manager threatens us every day. He says we're replaceable, that we're nothing." Her voice trembled with the injustice of it. "But my mom, she needs this medicine. It's not covered by insurance, and it costs a fortune." Daniel listened, absorbing every word like a sponge, his mind racing. This was the intelligence he couldn't get from spreadsheets or quarterly reports. He was hearing the heartbreaking reality of his workforce, the human cost of his company's efficiency. "He threatens you?" Daniel asked, his voice low and controlled, masking the fury building inside him. All the time, Sophia sighed, leaning her head back against the brick wall. He calls us names. Says we're lucky he lets us breathe his air. It's humiliating. She wiped a tear from her cheek, quick and angry, refusing to break down completely. I'm terrified he'll be evicted, she confessed, the word hanging heavy in the night air like a death sentence. If I lose this apartment, I don't know where we'll go. Shelters are full. Maybe I'd be sitting right here next to you. The parallel was striking and terrifying. She saw herself in him. That was the source of her empathy, the proximity to the edge. It was a shocking revelation for Daniel. His employees were living on the brink of disaster while he slept in silk sheets. You won't end up here, Daniel said firmly, a flash of the CEO breaking through the skies for a split second. You worked too hard for that. Sophia laughed, a dry, humorless sound that rattled in her chest. Hard work doesn't always pay, mister. Sometimes the bad guys win. Sometimes the rich just get richer and we just disappear. She looked up at the towering hotel, a fortress of wealth that seemed impenetrable. I wish the owner knew. I heard he's a billionaire. Does he even know what happens down here? The question hit Daniel like a physical punch to the gut. No, he hadn't known. And that was his greatest regret. He had been absent, a ghost in his own tower, allowing a tyrant to rule in his name. Maybe he'll find out, Daniel said, his eyes glinting in the dark with strange intensity. Maybe karma is closer than you think. Sophia looked at him, puzzled by his confidence, by the steel in his voice. You have hope? She observed, studying his dirty face. That's rare out here. She reached out and touched his arm, a gentle, human connection that bridged the gap between their worlds. Keep that hope. It's all we have. She was comforting him, the billionaire in disguise, when she was the one carrying the world on her shoulders. Her pure heart was undeniable, a beacon in the gloom. I have to go, she whispered, checking the time on her cheap plastic watch. If he catches me. The fear returned to her eyes, extinguishing the momentary peace. Thank you for listening. It's nice to talk to someone real. She stood up, smoothing her apron, preparing to put her mask back on. The kindness test was over, and she had not only passed, she had set a new standard for what it meant to be human. Just as Sophia turned to leave, the heavy metal door swung open with a violent crash that reverberated through the alley. Light flooded the dark space, blinding them both. Silhouetted in the doorway was the bad manager, his face twisted in a mask of apoplectic fury. He had been watching the cameras. I knew it, he screamed, stepping out into the rain that had just begun to fall, his voice cutting through the night like a siren. Feeding the rats, stealing company property. The accusation was loud, sharp, and dripping with venom. Sophia froze, her blood turned to ice in her veins. Sir, It was just a sandwich, she stammered, backing away, her hands raised in surrender. The manager lunged forward, grabbing her arm roughly, his fingers digging into her flesh. Stealing is stealing, he yelled, shaking her like a rag doll. I told you, no pity for the trash. He looked at Daniel with pure, unadulterated hatred. And you, I told you to leave. It was a chaotic, shocking scene of escalation. She paid for that sandwich herself, Daniel said, standing up to his full height. His voice was stronger now, less like a beggar, more like a commander on a battlefield. But the manager was too blinded by rage to notice the shift in tone. Shut up, bum. The manager spat, foam gathering at the corners of his mouth. You don't speak to me. You are nothing. He turned his wrath back to Sophia, pulling her closer. You're aiding and abetting a trespasser. You're giving hotel food to a homeless man against direct orders. Please, sir, Sophia cried, tears streaming down her face, mixing with the rain. It was my lunch. I didn't steal anything. Please don't hurt me. She was trembling violently, the terror of being evicted flashing before her eyes, overlaying the immediate physical threat. This was her nightmare coming true. The manager didn't care about the truth. He cared about power. He wanted to make an example of her. It was a heartbreaking abuse of authority, a display of dominance for the sake of cruelty. I don't care whose lunch it was, The manager roared, his face turning purple. "You disobeyed me. You questioned my authority by helping this filth." He pointed a shaking finger at Daniel. "You think you're a saint? You're just a rebellious little girl who doesn't know her place." The misogyny and classism were dripping from every word, forming a puddle of toxicity. Daniel clenched his fists, his knuckles white, struggling to maintain his cover. The urge to deliver revenge right then and there was overwhelming, but he had to wait. "Let her go," Daniel warned, his voice dropping an octave, carrying a dangerous resonance. The manager laughed, a cruel, barking sound that grated on the ears. "Or what? You'll beg me to death?" He shoved Sophia toward the door, causing her to stumble. "Get your things. You're done." The finality of the words hung in the air. The judgment had been passed without a trial, without mercy. Sophia looked at Daniel, her eyes wide with panic and sorrow. She had tried to do a good deed, and now she was paying the ultimate price. It was a cruel twist of destiny. The manager stood tall, feeling triumphant, completely unaware he had just fired the only person who had saved his boss' faith in humanity. The trap was sprung, but not on the victim he intended. "You're fired." The words echoed off the brick walls, sealing Sophia's fate with the permanence of a slamming prison door. In a fit of uncontrollable rage, the manager didn't just stop at verbal dismissal. He marched inside, snatched Sophia's purse from the hooks near the door, and threw it violently into the wet street. "Get your trash and get out of my sight," he screamed. The contents of her bag spilled out onto the muddy pavement, her keys, her wallet, a cherished picture of her mother, all soaking in the filth. It was a humiliated spectacle that stripped her of her last shred of dignity. Sophia gasped, a sound of pure devastation, running to gather her things in the pouring rain, sobbing openly now. "Please, I need this job," she begged, looking up at him from the ground, mud staining her knees. "My mom is sick. Please give me another chance." "He'll do anything." Her plea was raw, primal, and painful to witness. But the manager just sneered, crossing his arms over his dry suit, enjoying her desperation. "You should have thought of that before you decided to feed the animals." He looked at Daniel with a smug expression. "See what you did? You ruined her life." Daniel stood frozen, his heart pounding with a cold, calculated fury. He watched Sophia scramble in the mud, her uniform stained, her life falling apart because of his social experiment. Guilt washed over him like a tidal wave, but underneath it was a steely resolve. This manager was a monster. The shocking cruelty was beyond anything he had imagined in his worst scenarios. This wasn't just bad management, it was sadism. It was evil. "You will regret this," Daniel said, his voice cutting through the sound of the rain like a blade. The manager laughed again, a sound of utter dismissal. "Regret? Him taking out the garbage. Now, both of you, get lost before I call security to throw you off the curb." He turned his back on them, slamming the heavy steel door shut and locking it from inside. The sound of the lock clicking was like a gunshot, signaling the end of Sophia's life as she knew it. Sophia knelt in the puddle, clutching her wet purse to her chest, trying to protect the photo of her mother. She was shaking, not just from the cold, but from the shock of the trauma. She had lost everything in the span of 5 minutes. The revenge Daniel planned would be sweet, but right now, the pain was visceral and real. The manager thought he had won, thought he had exerted his dominance. He had no idea he had just signed his own termination papers with indelible ink. The rain fell harder, mixing with Sophia's tears, blurring the world into a gray smear of misery. She felt small, broken, and utterly defeated. The bad manager had taken her livelihood, but he couldn't take her spirit, though right now, it felt crushed under the weight of injustice. Karma was winding up for a massive swing, but in this moment, injustice reigned supreme. Daniel stepped forward, reaching out a hand to help her up, but she flinched, overwhelmed by the trauma. It was a heartbreaking sight. The system had failed her. He had failed her by not acting sooner. But he vowed, silently and fiercely, that he would make it right. He would burn the old system down and build a new one in her name. Sophia collapsed onto the curb, burying her face in her hands, her body curling into a tight ball of misery. Her shoulders heaved with uncontrollable sobs that racked her frame. I lost it, she choked out, her voice broken and jagged. I lost everything, just for being kind. The irony was a bitter pill to swallow, choking her. She believed in the goodness of the world, and the world had chewed her up and spit her out into the gutter. It was a life lesson that seemed to scream cruelty wins. Kindness is weakness. What am I going to tell my mom? She wailed, looking up at the gray sky, as if asking God for an explanation. We have nothing now. No insurance. No rent money. The fear of being evicted was no longer a distant threat. It was an imminent reality, a clock ticking down to zero. She felt the crushing weight of financial ruin pressing on her chest, making it hard to breathe. The rain soaked her uniform, chilling her to the bone, but she barely felt it. The cold inside her soul was far worse than the weather. Daniel knelt beside her, disregarding the mud ruining his disguise, wishing he could shed it right there. You didn't lose everything, Sophia, he said gently, trying to offer comfort without revealing himself yet. You still have your integrity. That man has nothing but a hollow chest. But his words fell hollow against the magnitude of her despair. Integrity doesn't pay the rent. She cried out, a flash of anger cutting through her sorrow. Integrity doesn't buy medicine. It doesn't keep us warm. She was right. In the harsh, unforgiving reality of her life, moral victories were luxuries she couldn't afford. Daniel felt the sting of her truth. He saw the heartbreaking gap between his world and hers. He had the luxury of integrity because the survival was guaranteed. She had necessity of survival, which often demanded the sacrifice of dignity. This social experiment had real casualties, and she was the primary victim. He felt a deep, crushing sense of responsibility. I'm so sorry, Daniel whispered, his voice thick with emotion. This is my fault. I shouldn't have been here. Sophia shook her head, wiping her eyes with dirty hands, smearing mascara and mud. No, it's his. He's evil. She looked at Daniel, her eyes red and swollen, yet a flicker of concern remained. But you're safe for tonight? Even in her darkest moment, she worried about him. The miracle of her empathy was inextinguishable, a fire that water could not drown. It'll be fine, Daniel assured her, his voice firm. But you need to go home. Get dry. Don't give up. Sophia stood up shakily, clutching her wet bag like a lifeline. Home, she whispered, as if the word was fragile and might break. I don't know how long it'll have one. She looked at the hotel one last time, a look of betrayal on her face. She had given her best to that place, and it had destroyed her without a second thought. She turned to walk away, her figure small and lonely under the streetlights, trudging toward the subway. She believed destiny had abandoned her. She didn't know that the man watching her leave was about to change her life forever. She walked into the shadows, a poor maid with a broken heart, leaving the undercover billionaire burning with a need for justice so intense it felt like a physical fever. Daniel watched Sophia disappear into the rainy night, a solitary figure against the uncaring city backdrop. He wanted to run after her, to tell her everything right there, to promise her the world. But he knew the reveal had to be public. It had to be a lesson for everyone, especially the manager. He needed to dismantle the culture of fear the manager had created, and that required a stage and an audience. He stayed back, his heart heavy but his mind racing with strategic plans. He stood up, shedding the posture of the homeless man like a snake shedding its skin. His eyes, previously filled with feigned desperation, now burned with the cold, calculating fire of a CEO. He reached into the lining of his ragged coat and pulled out a hidden burner phony of precaution he had kept for emergencies. He dialed a number, his fingers moving with precision. "It's me," he said, his voice commanding and devoid of the rasp he had used all night. "Get the car and call the board. We have a situation." A code red. He looked at the hotel entrance, the scene of the crime. The bad manager was probably inside, laughing, feeling powerful, perhaps drinking a coffee and congratulating himself on cleaning up. Daniel felt a grim satisfaction, knowing that laughter would be short-lived. He walked away from the hotel, moving into the darkness of the alley to meet his extraction team. He needed to clean up, to transform back into Daniel Morgan. The unpretentious beggar was gone, the titan of industry, was returning to reclaim his throne. The rain washed away the dirt on his face, revealing the determination underneath. He felt a strange sense of destiny fulfilled. This night had started as a test, but it had become a mission. He had found the rot, but he had also found the treasure. Sophia Davis was the heart of his hotel, the embodiment of the values he claimed to uphold, and he had let her be crushed. That ended tomorrow. He disappeared into the waiting black sedan around the corner, leaving the wet cardboard and the memory of the kindness test behind on the pavement. The city slept, unaware that a storm was brewing. The shocking events of the night were just a prelude. The real drama was set for morning, and it would be biblical. As the car drove away, gliding silently over the wet asphalt, Daniel looked out the window, thinking of Sophia alone in her apartment. "Hold on," he whispered to glass. "Just one more night. Help is coming." He was plotting his revenge, but it was a revenge fueled by a love for justice, not just a hate for the villain. Karma was coming, and it was riding in a limousine. The stage was cleared. The actors had played their parts. Now, the director was stepping in to rewrite the ending. The transition from hopelessness to miracle began now, and nothing would stop it. The next morning, the sun rose over the city, casting a deceptive calm over the hotel's gleaming facade. But the atmosphere at the entrance was anything but calm. It was electric with panic. A convoy of 5 black luxury SUVs and a stretched limousine blocked the driveway, engines humming with a low, menacing power. It looked like a presidential visit or a federal raid. The staff lined up nervously on the sidewalk, confused and anxious, straightening their uniforms with trembling hands. This was the arrival of the undercover billionaire. Though they didn't know it yet, the bad manager was running around like a headless chicken, sweating profusely despite the cool morning air. "Straighten your ties. Smile. Stand up straight," he hissed at the staff, his eyes darting wildly. He was terrified. He had received a call from corporate at dawn saying the hotel owner was arriving for a surprise inspection regarding personnel matters. He had no idea that the owner had already inspected him the night before from the gutter. He turned pale, checking his reflection in the glass, praying everything was perfect. Sophia wasn't there. She was at home, likely crying, looking through want ads, trying to figure out how to survive. The absence of the poor maid was a gap in the line that Daniel would soon fill with justice. The other staff members whispered, wondering who was in the limo, their minds racing with possibilities. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. They sensed that Judgment Day was upon them, though they didn't know why. The manager stood at the front of the line, forcing a wide, obsequious smile that looked more like a rictus of pain. "Welcome, Mr. Morgan," he practiced under his breath, ready to charm the boss with his usual sycophancy. He was confident in his ability to manipulate, to present the perfect facade. He believed he was a perfect employee, the guardian of a brand. The irony was palpable. Destiny was about to slap him in the face with the force of a freight train. The door of the lead SUV opened, and large security guards stepped out, looking serious and professional. They cleared a path to the limousine, their earpieces buzzing. The manager stepped forward, bowing slightly, eager to impress, his palms slick with sweat. "Everything is in order," he muttered to himself, trying to quell his rising nausea. He didn't see the karma train barreling down the tracks. Inside the limo, Daniel adjusted his diamond cufflinks. He was wearing his finest bespoke suit, sharp, intimidating, and impeccably tailored. He looked at the his hotel through the tinted glass. He took a deep breath, channeling the rage he felt into a cold, hard resolve. It was time for the reveal. It was time to show them that kindness is the ultimate power. The driver walked around to the back door of the limousine. The staff held their breath, the silence absolute. The handle turned. The shocking moment had arrived. The king was back, and he knew where the bodies were buried because he had been buried with them. The heavy car door swung open, and a polished black shoe stepped onto the pavement, the same pavement where the homeless man had sat just hours before, begging for water. Daniel Morgan emerged, tall, imposing, and radiating an aura of absolute authority. He buttoned his jacket, scanning the line of staff with piercing eyes. His gaze locked instantly onto the manager. The silence was deafening, amplified by the city noise fading into the background. The manager's smile froze, then faltered. He blinked, confusion washing over his face like a wave. He recognized the eyes. He recognized the voice. But the context was impossible. "Mr. Morgan?" he stammered, his voice cracking like a teenager's. He looked closer, squinting against the sun, and realization hit him like a physical blow to the chest. The beggar, the trash, the man he had kicked. His face turned a ghostly white, drained of all blood, filled with absolute terror and regret. "Good morning," Daniel said, his voice cool and steady, yet carrying the weight of a judge's gavel. "We met last night." The words dropped like bombs in the quiet morning. The staff gasped. Whispers of shocking disbelief rippled through the line. The manager's knees buckled, and he grabbed a pillar for support. "Sir, I didn't know," he squeaked, sweating profusely, his world collapsing. "I was just following policy, protecting the brand." "Your policy is to kick human beings?" Daniel asked, stepping closer, invading the manager's space with menacing calm. "Your policy is to mock the hungry? To fire the kind? To call people trash?" The judgment in his voice was absolute and scathing. "I was that man you humiliated. I was the one you kicked. I was the one you denied water to." The reveal was complete. The manager looked like he wanted to vomit, his arrogance evaporating like mist. It was a misunderstanding. The manager tried to lie, backing away, his hands shaking. "I was protecting the hotel." Daniel cut him off with a sharp gesture. "You were poisoning my hotel. You fired the only person who showed true hospitality. You fired the only person who acted with honor." The revenge was public and devastating. The manager looked around for support, but saw only disgusted faces among the staff. Karma had come full circle. You treated a homeless man with cruelty, thinking no one mattered, thinking no one was watching. Daniel declared for everyone to hear. But character is how you treat those who can do nothing for you. You failed the test. He pointed to the street with a rigid finger. "Get your things. You are fired immediately, and you are barred from all my properties worldwide." The manager slumped, defeated, destroyed by his own arrogance. Daniel turned to his assistant, ignoring the sobbing man. "Get Sophia Davis on the phone. Send a car for her. Now." The miracle was in motion. The tyrant was fallen, and the air felt lighter instantly, as if a storm had passed. An hour later, a confused and frightened Sophia Davis arrived in a company car, her eyes red and puffy from crying. She walked into the lobby, clutching her bag, expecting to sign termination papers or face legal trouble. Instead, she found the staff gathered in the grand hall, clapping. At the center stood Daniel Morgan, the hotel owner, smiling warmly, looking nothing like the beggar and yet exactly like him. Sophia stopped, stunned, her breath catching in her throat. She looked at the man in the suit, then recognized the kind eyes of the friend she had made in the alley. Her hand flew to her mouth. "It's you," she whispered, tears springing to her eyes again. "You're—" Daniel walked over to her, taking her hands, the same hands that had offered him a sandwich in his own. "I'm Daniel, and I want to thank you." I don't understand," Sophia stammered, looking around to cheering staff. "The undercover billionaire. It was you?" Daniel nodded, his expression tender. "You passed the test you didn't know you were taking. Sophia, you showed me that kindness still lives here, even when it's punished. You risked everything for a stranger." He turned to the staff, his voice booming. "This woman risked everything to help a stranger. That is the leadership I want. That is the spirit of this hotel." "Sophia," Daniel announced, his voice echoing in the marble hall. "The manager is gone. I'm offering you his position. General manager of guest relations." The room erupted in gasps and cheers. It was a shocking, beautiful twist of destiny. "Me?" Sophia cried, trembling, shaking her head. "But I'm just a maid. I don't have a degree." "You have something more important," Daniel corrected her. "We can teach you the software. We can teach you the budget. We can't teach a heart like yours. You are the heart of this hotel." He handed her an envelopia bonus check to cover her mother's medical bills, and then some. "And this is for your mother. No more worries. You are safe now. It was a miracle. Sophia broke down, this time tears of pure joy washing away the pain. The poor maid had become the boss. The bad manager was gone, exiled by his own cruelty. Karma had delivered justice in the most poetic way possible. Sophia hugged Daniel, disregarding protocol, and he hugged her back, burying the memory of the cold alley. The heartbreaking night had turned into a glorious morning of redemption. Kindness is the ultimate power, Daniel said to the room, raising Sophia's hand. And as she stood there, beaming through her tears, everyone knew it was true. The life lesson was complete. The hotel had found its soul again, and it wore a maid's uniform. In a world obsessed with status and titles, Daniel and Sophia taught us a timeless truth: your value isn't written on your paycheck, but in your heart. They showed us that while power can force obedience, only kindness can command respect. If you also believe that empathy is the ultimate superpower and that good people deserve to win, then you have found your home. Subscribe now and join our community of dreamers and believers who know that character always outshines gold. Let's make this message loud and clear, like this video as a salute to Sophia's courage and integrity. Comment below with your truth. Have you ever helped a stranger when no one was watching, or has a stranger ever saved you? I want to read your story. And share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that sometimes, just sometimes, justice is served and the good guys finish first. And while you're here, know that the story is just the beginning. Our channel is a treasure chest of emotional journeys and shocking reveals just like this one. Explore our older videos to discover other unforgettable tales that will restore your faith in humanity. And to ensure you don't miss the next roller coaster of emotion we're preparing, turn on the notification bell right now. Trust me, you won't want to be left out of surprises coming next.